I was initially going to create an app that could be on the go. You wouldn't have to be at your laptop, or it could be on a tablet. This would be something that players and the performance team could easily reference to see the status of a player's stats when it comes to the modules they were sharing data on. And a lot of this was inspired by a lot of the wearables people have, whether it's on their phone or on their ring or on their Garmin or an Apple Watch and so on. Creating something that's both familiar but also easy to pick up and user-friendly was the idea behind this. As you can see, it was a lot to make in a very short time period, and I didn't even get all of the wireframe done. So then I decided to really reduce the scope and focus on one specific area, which was the recovery, and I ended up doing that in Tableau. Now, when it comes to this design, 𝐚𝐻𝐻𝐿 basically inspired this look. 𝐚𝐻𝐻𝐿 used a lot of neon to be something that when someone sees, they think of sports, they think of speed, they think of athleticism. So I thought that was a great color to use, but also a color people might be familiar with when it comes to sports.
So hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Secrets to the Viz. Today I have a very special guest with me, Damola, who is here to talk about a couple of things. Damola has a lot of Viz of the day in his belt. If you look at his Tableau Public profile, it's really amazing work. So if you're looking for inspiration, he is your guy to go to. Over to you to do a little short intro by yourself.
Thanks, Louis, for that. So hi everyone, my name is Damola Ladipo. And I'm a senior data visualization specialist for DevTech Systems. I've been there for almost 5 years now. I develop Tableau dashboards, but I also support development of visualizations that are both static and interactive in R and Python using ggplot, Plotly, and many others. So I went to grad school in 2015 to study international development with a focus on monitoring evaluation and GIS. After that, I worked in a variety of different countries in Central Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. Although my focus was on monitoring evaluation, which does include a lot of data analysis and visualizations, the thing I was most interested in the work was the data visualization aspect. So I decided to basically make that my career. I started back in the US at DevTech Systems, and I worked there ever since. I've also, as you may know, have been creating some personal visualizations, which are all shared on my Tableau Public profile. I've used that to develop my skills and interact with the data fam community.
I saw your work on the Gundam's Multiverse. What's your favorite series?
That's a great question. I mean, honestly, anything that's part of the Universal Century is some of my favorites. Unlike the other Gundams, which a lot of it's in space, that one is one of the few that's very grounded on Earth. And it feels like it was inspired a lot by the Vietnam War, which is interesting. Because the whole point of Gundam is supposed to be showing the negative aspects of war and what it does to people and society. I think that one captured that aspect the most. It kind of strayed away from the more fantastical space, which I still like, but it was more grounded.
Probably one of the most heartbreaking Gundam series.
Definitely.
So maybe let's start off on your visual resume. Tell us your thought process of building this together, because there's so many ways of creating a resume. What made you create something in Tableau with the layout that you did?
Yeah, I've always been one, especially in the last 5-10 years, to try and make my resumes to include some level of visualizations in them. But I've always wondered, could I just make an actual visualization resume that's not created in Word or Google Docs? And Tableau was a great medium. It's something that I'd had on the back of my mind to do. I think it was the end of last year. And it still includes like the key things that you would have in a resume. It's not machine readable, but if someone was interested, they could go to this link and see basically not just my portfolio skills, but also how I implement these technical skills in Tableau.
Anyone who's looking to create a resume like this could probably take a lot of pointers from how you have put everything together. The design is very clean, very well spaced, and kind of like an art piece as well to showcase your skill as a data visualizer. You have the CFC Performance Insight, and this was done as a submission to a competition, I think half a year ago or something.
Yeah, the Chelsea's football club and their insights team basically had a competition March through April of this year, asking anyone to enter visualizations for some specific modules they were sharing data on. It was real data on one of their players, but it was anonymized, so you don't know which player it was. There was 3 types of modules of data you could use. The first was a GPS performance metrics, which is basically on the player's speed, the acceleration, the distance they've traveled during a game. Another one was the physical capability, like a battery of tests for a player and how they move. And the last was recovery stats. So these were the things such as the blood biomarkers, the joint range, the level of soreness, the quality of sleep a player is having, and how they perceive their recovery, which is interesting.
That's really cool. So walk us through your design process. How do you go about creating that story around the data set?
When I was first working on this, it was actually looking quite different. I was initially going to create an app for this, and I was going to cover all 3 modules. The purpose of this is that I wanted to have an app that could be on the go. You wouldn't have to be at your laptop, or it could be on a tablet. This would be something that players and the performance team could easily reference to see the status of a player's stats when it comes to the modules they were sharing data on. So we have things like the player profile information here, as well as notifications in the top right, and then information on the injury status and so on. There are a lot of aspects in this that were ported over into the Tableau version I created. And the general idea behind this design was I wanted something that was obviously user-friendly, something that someone could easily pick up, and they wouldn't need a ton of technical knowledge of the stats they're looking at, versus someone on the insights team, but also someone on the medical staff could also see the status of a player. And a lot of this was inspired by a lot of the wearables people have, whether it's on their phone or on their ring or on their Garmin or an Apple Watch and so on. Creating something that's both familiar, but also easy to pick up and user-friendly was the idea behind this. As you can see, it was a lot to make in a very short time period. And I didn't even get all of the wireframe done. So then I decided to really reduce the scope and focus on one specific area, which was the recovery, and I ended up doing that in Tableau. Now, when it comes to this design, you can see it's quite different from how it looked before. There were a number of things that, both by chance, but also on just me coming up with designs within a short time period. There were basically 3 things that inspired this look. The first was Nike. So Nike, I know in the past, has really used a lot of neon to be like something that when someone sees, they think of sports, they think of speed, they think of athleticism. So I thought that was a great color to use as a warning color, but also a color people might be familiar with when it comes to sports. Another was actually game inspired. So I had been watching these previews for Bungie's upcoming game, Marathon. And I really like the design of Marathon. I don't know if the game's going to be any good, but the design of it's just this anachronistic look in the future. It also looks like a game that could have been made in the 1980s. And they call it like retro futurism, where you can't really tell what time period it looks like. Lastly, my favorite movie franchise is Alien. And I've always loved the way those have a unique look to them. And I wanted mine to have a unique look. So yeah, those are the 3 things that inform the general design of the dashboard itself.
I think this is really interesting because you have very stylized KPI cards, if you will. And I'm assuming that these are done in Figma.
I'm glad you asked that, because normally I would do these container boxes in Figma. So what I did is I created these deeper blue triangles that use the same color background in Figma. And those are just overlaid on top of the container boxes. So it keeps that sharp look. Because I've always felt that as much as I can create really interesting background images in Figma, it's just not as sharp as I want it to look. So in the end, that's what I ended up doing.
That's a very interesting way of doing it. I would have thought that everything is done in Figma. So you're saying that this portion here is actually a overlay image. I'm assuming that the reason behind that is you wanted to make use of the dynamic zone visibility to expand and collapse so that it takes up the entire screen.
Exactly. Yes.
Walk us through how you arrange the containers to allow you to do this expansion and collapsing.
So the dynamic zones in this data visualization were actually developed using similar things that were done for Ellen Blackburn's dynamic zone KPI demo. We can look at the inflammation category. So hovering over, this can be used to open one specific category. If we just click here, it opens up to show additional information. on the blood biomarker information. There's also a close button here, which collapses the containers. And this uses dynamic zones. So if we go to where each of these are controlled, and you can see here, this is the button called expand button blood bio. And if we just go to this dummy calculation, we can see one. There's also a parameter used here, which is the dynamic zone parameter. That up also set a string. And if we just go to close button, you can see it just uses close here. And it's the same calculation that's used for all of the close buttons. So in the dashboard view, you can see this entire container is using the parameter 1. And in the parameter action, there are 6 parameter actions in total to open each of the category dynamic zones. So we can just look at the first button under sheets that have been selected, expand button blood bio, target parameter dynamic zone parameter, and it's using that dummy that I showed earlier too. And this is done for each of the buttons to open each container. And there's just one clear parameter action. This closes all of them. It's redundant to an extent because the others should be closed, but you don't need to make multiple, since it can be used to close all of them, even if the others are closed. So that's how it's done.
Just curious, the skeleton figures and the muscle body, was it an image that you did in Figma as well, or was it given by the dataset?
There's actually this really useful called the Human Anatomy Component System in Figma. And it's this really detailed SVG. I was going to create this so almost anything could be highlighted, but it's very difficult to do that in a very short time period. So,
yeah, because you probably have to kind of redraw the polygons for different parts of the body and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But it'll be quite an interesting dashboard to revisit sometime down the road.
I have thought I would end up making the app maybe one day.
That and Gunpla.
Yeah, exactly. Long list of things I haven't finished.
So obviously this has been a real cool piece of work to have done this in 4 weeks, or in fact less than 4 weeks, because you started off with the app idea, right?
Yeah.
So I was looking at your Tableau Public profile. You do have a lot of sports related vizzes. Is that your favorite topic to viz about?
Definitely one of my favorites. I played a lot of sports as a kid, and I still try to play from time to time now. I'm very interested in the growing integration of sports data analysis and data visualization, especially sports visualization is something that still I feel can be improved. And however I can participate in that, whether it's on my free time or career-wise, I find it really fascinating and interesting and fun to do.
Is there any other this idea that you are currently thinking about that you haven't started, or you may have started halfway through?
Yeah, I am working on some visualizations, but actually not in Tableau, in Python, R, and D3. And they would also be soccer or football related, depending on what you call it. I just haven't published them yet.
What do you think is the key differences between ggplot and versus Tableau?
I don't know if this is a controversial opinion, but I do feel like Tableau is excellent when it comes to quickly producing a dashboard. But sometimes when it comes to standalone visualizations that are interactive, there's a reason why the New York Times uses things like D3, is because of how the functionality and how smooth they run. Using tools like that, especially when they're web-based, is really great for users to interact with the visualization. So there are definitely some pros and cons.
I've seen a lot of colleagues who are data scientists and analysts. They do prefer to create visualization within like Plotly or ggplot, just because you can add a little bit more smoother interaction with it, and you can modify the data on the fly and have it just refresh directly. Whereas for Tableau, you could, but you have to write like additional calculated fields. You need to swap the measures in and out in order to do a little bit more exploration. So I think Tableau has its pros when it comes to delivering a final polish product dashboard. But when it comes to exploration of data, it is not as flexible as coding. Then again, the two softwares are built for vastly different audience.
Exactly.
So I think we have everything we need for your viz. Thank you again, Damola, for spending time with us today to talk about your visual resume as well as this amazing dashboard that you created for the Vizathon. I hope everyone learned something from this, and we'll see everyone at the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you.